Okay, cheers, boys and girls. You saw Michael Liedtke a few moments ago, or maybe in another episode, where we were talking about his new battery pack and the guys over at Maxwell and stuff like that. And that's all very technical and good. But Michael Liedtke and I go back a lot further. And we go back to that plane over there. That's the McDonnell Douglas MD-11. This was a DC-9, but McDonnell Douglas didn't want to have anything have a DC before that. At the beginning, there was this plane. This was the Douglas DC-3. And the Douglas DC-3, in essence, turned the world around.
Absolutely.
As far as commercial aircraft was concerned. This was the mainstay, and still they're flying all over the place. They're still out there. These things were phenomenally good. And when McDonnell Douglas asked me to come and work with them sometime around 1993, I was kind of proud because I had one of my uncles who flew a Douglas Dauntless during the Second World War. He was kind of one of the guys at the Battle of Midway. I mean, it was a big deal. And so coming to the McDonnell Douglas organization, I thought was going to be a good experience for me. It turned out that it was mixed, I guess would be the best way to put it. But you were actually working there. I was only a consultant, but you actually volunteered to sign up.
Sign up there, and it was my second job, as an engineer, coming from Germany, having the same accent that I have these days, yeah. And the one thing is, I did some internships during my university days, at Mercedes and at Bosch, so I knew a lot of kind of like these high-tech companies. So I thought, man, aerospace, this is going to be it. I mean, this is robots galore. I mean, there's all this automation, all this stuff, and then suddenly going there and hearing the hammering of somebody installing rivets by hand, and everybody telling me, oh, this is aviation. You have no idea. It's completely different. Yeah. And it's when the first time, really within a few days, I heard, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that.
It's amazing how many things you could not do. Unbelievable how many things you could not do. And quite frankly, that's what I bumped into when I first went there. They gave me a tour. Ron Suter. We both knew Ron. Ron was a hero, but he had a horrible job. I mean, trying to convince people to do something new, different, better with McDonnell Douglas was very, very, very difficult. And he and, what's his boss's name?
Oh, Al Haggerty.
Al Haggerty. Him and Al Haggerty fought an uphill battle continuously, trying to bring sense to nonsense. At one time, Douglas was a leader in the world. I mean, the world leader in commercial aircraft and military aircraft as well. They were phenomenal. But something happened, and they decided to rest on their laurels. Like, for instance, when this DC-9 came out, having 3 engines and being able to go across the Atlantic.
DC-10, yeah.
The DC-10. That was absolutely brilliant. That was a phenomenal, because now I didn't have as much fuel to take with me, and I got the same number of people across the ocean, and this thing sold like hotcakes. But sometimes what happens is people decide to hire the wrong guy, or maybe just sit on your hands and hope that the world's never going to change. But we're going to talk to you a little bit about
how things can change.
Yeah, and sometimes not for the better. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of our experiences there. So Michael just said that when he came there, he was expecting things. Well, when I went there, I was expecting stuff too. So they gave me a tour. And I went around the different build halls. And I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm going, oh my God, I can't believe my eyes. Oh my God, I can't believe my eyes. Things were being done in such an archaic, I thought I was in some kind of antique shipyard. You know, you see those old movies in Britain or Scotland, I guess, where guys are up there riveting and banging and drilling and going on, and I'm going, how in the world can you make any quality here? So they said, when I was all done, they said, you're an expensive consultant, and they said, give me a presentation. I want a presentation on, you know, what you've discovered and whatnot. And so I was marshaled up, and I started going through my presentation. And there was a bunch of yawning going on and whatnot. But I did have Bob Hood, and the two guys that were the most important were Bob Hood and what was that other guy's name? The guy in charge of marketing and sales or whatever. Do you remember him?
Oh, shoot, I don't remember him anymore.
Anyhow, it doesn't really matter. They called him Bob Nothing Under the Hood. So that was how I was. That's what they tried to console me with after I gave my speech and found out not everyone was pleased with what I had to say. They kept saying things like, you can't do that. No was the correct answer. Yeah. But I was just a consultant. And so anyway, we got done. I got done with my presentation. I had shown a lot of things that I thought could have been done. And there was a guy sitting in the front row, and that was Bob Nothing Under the Hood. And he had his arms folded, and he said, all right, you've shown us a lot of things. You know, McDonnell Douglas wants to lead the way. Who else is doing this job? And people started to snicker. But nobody wanted to laugh out loud because you'd get fired.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my first exposure to top management at McDonnell Douglas. So I'd like to hear your story of what it's like to be an engineer at McDonnell Douglas.
So I mean, the one thing, you know, even looking back years after the experience there, it was kind of an exercise in frustration. You were always proposing something new, a change, something different, and it didn't go anywhere. It would just always end in the round file cabinet. And you just kind of wonder, so why am I not making any difference? I mean, one thing is, so when this workshop happened with you, I mean, it was also just, okay, let's see, maybe now we can do something. Maybe we can do something different, you know, we can do something exciting here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was still, you know, high hopes, you know, because the one thing was also happening in these days, Airbus was certainly breathing down their neck.
Oh, wow, yeah. What did John McDonald say? Okay, on the front cover of Business Week, McDonnell Douglas, number 3 and fading fast. Wow, I could not believe how he summed it up so nicely.
Right.
I mean, it's one of the worst I wish I don't have all the articles. I wished I had.
But he said, we've made other plans.
Yes,
we've made other plans.
Yes.
And in my naivety, maybe naivety because I was still young, I went to one of the upper managers and I said, you know what, I just started here, I'm kind of curious. So what are these other plans? And the response that I got was, oh, here we have somebody saying that the king is not wearing any clothes.
Yes, and that seems to be, yeah, so, you know, one thing, we're going to talk about some big changes that we wanted to make, but let's start off with some smaller ones. We know what this is, but I'll bet you at home, you have no idea what this could possibly be. Now, here's something you need to know. I was told by sales and marketing, this is an essential part of the aircraft. Now I want you to look right here, because if you were on the airplane, this is what you'd see, a little door like that. And you're probably asking yourself, what could this possibly be? So let me tell you, on this side there's a little handle, and you take the little handle and you can pull it out. See how they got Velcro there? That was a big advancement, by the way. Oh yeah, Velcro. They pull it out, and then they tip it over like this and dump out double-edged razor blades. We were supposed to try and figure out how can we reduce the cost of the airplane, and I pulled this out and I said, well, how much is this worth? And the material cost was $7.22 for this little teeny tiny aluminum that's in here. And the labor cost was $44.80.
Because it had 12 rivets.
Because it had, yes, 12 rivets, 10, 12. Yes, you're absolutely correct. 12 rivets. And probably the only reason it had 12 was because they couldn't figure out how to get 14 in place. Why would anybody make this, first off, period? Why would you make it? Nobody was using double-edged razor blades anymore. What earthly reason would this be here for? I mean, who's going to do it? And then I asked the maintenance guys. The guy said, I knew that was there, but I never did anything with it. There's never anything in it. So on and on and on. And then, of course, its brother or sister, I can't find right now, but was the ashtray. There's a big sign that says no smoking, but we had an ashtray. And I said, why don't we get rid of them? And the answer was just, I felt so stupid afterward. Well, how's anybody going to put their cigarette out? Or what are they going to do with the ashes for their cigarette if you don't have an ashtray? And I said, but there's smoke alarms on the plane and it says no smoking. Yeah, but, and that was...
If you have a cigarette.
It's amazing how hard it was to make anything happen. So we're going to talk today a little bit about a couple of things that we saw that killed this huge company, this huge, I mean, megalith of a company. The site where this magnificent company used to be, I mean, is gone.
It's dirt.
All been, yeah, it's all just dirt. It's hard for me to get, it's sad as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's probably the best way to put it together. It's sad, you know. It's like there was 40,000 people working there, and these were all high-paying, good-paying jobs.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And just because of just a few losers on top, this is gone. Huh?
Yeah.
Because they were constantly being taught, don't change anything. Just leave it as is. Best case, repaint the airplane, give it a new name, and see if you find an idiot that buys it. Huh?
And that's basically where MD-11 came from. They painted it a new color. Now, tragically, Michael and I worked on something that could have changed the planet for these guys. If you look up there at the top, you can see on the left-hand side, that's what the old McDonnell Douglas cockpit looked like.
For the MD-90?
Yep. And the DC-10. The next to it was
MD-90,
was it 90?
Yeah, MD-90, yeah.
Anyway, the one next to it is the one that we worked on, and it wasn't good for our careers. Actually, it wasn't good for McDonnell Douglas either. See the guy down on the bottom there in the sketch? That we had an artist, and he portrayed me with what he thought was a loudmouth something or other. Anyway, that's Bob Hood, and I'm the guy with the machine gun. And this picture over here will work for food. That happened shortly after the two of us found other things to do. I was fired.
I left, when I saw there's no more future.
So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how do we get these, what happened during this time frame where, I don't know how to describe these guys except for self-centered.
Self-serving.
Yeah.
Definitely more interested in their own benefits than anybody else's benefits. That's what it all boiled down to. I mean, and we can maybe just start just with this project where how we met.
Yeah.
So Sandy came, and it was a workshop designed for manufacturing assembly.
Yeah.
How can we take this instrument panel that's sitting in the MD-90 and reduce the parts? How can we make it more efficiently? And I just came from, after 4 years working for Mercedes-Benz in Germany, and the first time I actually saw a cockpit in real life, in person, standing right there. And I walked up to Sandy and I said, Sandy, I mean, this is a waste of time, removing some fasteners. They need to redesign the whole thing. Look at this, it's ugly.
Yeah.
And you said to me back then, shh, we'll get to that later. We just have to.
We got to get into it slowly.
we got to get on this workshop. Huh?
Yeah.
And so then, Sandy, you were nice enough, that you said, you know what, we're going to go a different route here. And so you and I, we said, okay, everybody else is figuring out how to remove some fasteners, how to remove some parts here and there. And we did something that probably nobody did there before. We went on the expedition to figure out what is the competition doing. So we went to the Long Beach airport, and there was an Airbus A300 parked there. And, Sandy, was quick enough to convince somebody that they should literally give us the key to the airplane, and we went into the airplane.
I'm telling you, there is nothing that works faster and better than looking around at a maintenance guy that looks like he could use a drink. And this was before 9/11,
right.
But I will tell you, things were a lot looser at the airports in those days. And one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, there was the two of us. I've forgotten the name. There was a lady that was on that project as well. I can't remember what her name was, but she was on interiors, and we were doing cockpits. And there was 4 or 5 of us maybe that got on, and we went through, and it was vastly different.
Right, and we were crawling into the avionics bay.
Yeah.
We were looking at, there was like a little hatch door, and it was all milled out of a solid block, no riveted pieces together, integral parts. I mean, seems like they listened to your presentation. You've never been there.
Yeah,
huh?
well,
And
and monolithic structure was, or high-speed machining, was something actually there was a lot of concepts that I'm sure other people might have looked at but didn't have the guts to do. So I normally don't have too many things, especially off an airplane. But let me show you. This. This is a waste pipe bracket, and in essence, what you do is you put it all together. You got this bent piece of aluminum here, and then you've got 2 plastic injection molded pieces, and then they're bolted together using these fancy screws, and of course you got to have nuts. And then this thing here, this is riveted into the floor beam. So there's a big hole in back of it, a lightning hole in back of this, and waste pipe, and sometimes you'd also have a bundle of wires go around it. So this was in one of my earlier workshops, and we found out that this thing had basically, from an operation, it had 15 parts, but from an operation standpoint, it took 210 different operations to make things happen. The assembly time was 46 minutes each, and the labor cost was $35.27. The material cost was $28.74. And remember, that's a bargain because this was $44 plus $7, so almost $50. And then the total cost was $64.01, and the mass was 2.1 ounces. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but at the end of the day, $600 a pound in those days was what the airplane companies would pay for weight reduction. So we had this workshop. This was one of the pieces in it, and this is what we came up with. This fits into the little hole that's in the floor beam. So here is where the aluminum rib would go, and then you pushed it, and then these 2 snaps would hold it in place. Then the pipe would go through, and you'd put a chicken band holding it in place. Now, you'll notice that this is a different color, and the reason for that is because ordinary chicken bands don't work. You have to use aircraft quality chicken bands. So there you go, and that's kind of like what they did. So let's look at what the savings were. Okay, so the number of operations went down to 8. The number of parts went down to 3. The assembly time went down to 1.5 minutes. The labor cost was now $1.15. The material cost was $2.44. We had to add tooling cost because, and what we did was we just took this mold and modified it to make that mold. And that cost us $14,000 and $14,522. The total cost now is $3.59, and the new weight was only 8 ounces. Now, that sounds pretty good, but this is what was sent to me. This was the illustration that I sent, and if you're a consultant, you don't get a trophy or something. But anyways, this is an excerpt from one of the guys. The attached file is an illustration of what we did. It was given to the McDonnell Douglas President's Award for Cost Time Reduction and awarded a United States patent, $5,823,484. And the brackets and tray eliminated 1,286 parts, 377 holes drilled in primary structure, 1,300 drilled holes for a total of 400 rivets, 650 bolts and nuts and washers for an approximate weight savings of 32 pounds.
Per aircraft.
Per aircraft. And that was for the MD-90, which was a small plane. On the MD-11, it went to the moon. This is one of the things that kind of went from McDonnell Douglas to Boeing, actually. Boeing put these in afterward. It was a big savings on all of their aircraft. They immediately made the change. So, did you ever hear how long it took to get this in place?
No, never.
3 years. It took 3 years of, no, that can't work. No, you don't understand. No, that won't work. No, that won't work. Anyhow, that's kind of like what the engineers were up against. It was easy to come up with ideas that looked like they should work. Not so easy to get them implemented.
Not the implementation.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the end, when we had our workshop and we gave a presentation, and it was actually 3 presentations. One was from the team. They came up with some ideas how to reduce some parts. Then Sandy, you told me, I'm going to give the last presentation because I want to make sure you don't get fired.
Yes.
And so I gave my presentation, and what I said to the guys was, you know what? I just came from Mercedes-Benz. You might have heard of this car company. We always had this saying, the cockpit, the instrument panel there looks like an airplane, like a cockpit. But I said to these guys, you know what? I saw this now the first time, the real thing, and I have some advice for you. Don't start producing cars because you would go bankrupt tomorrow because this thing is butt ugly. And there was how can he say that? And I think then you continued with your presentation.
Yeah.
But at the end, the suggestion was made, you know what, guys? Why don't we go up to the Art Center College of Design, a local design school in Pasadena. It's about 40 minutes drive by car, and have these students work on some concepts, on some ideas. How could we improve this cockpit? How could we take this thing, that looks the 70s? How can we take this looking into the 2000s, something modern? And fortunately enough, there was one gentleman there, Al Haggerty, VP of Engineering. He said, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's try it out.
Yeah. He was fireproof. He had sold his Douglas stock, and he was now a millionaire, so he didn't give a damn. Yeah.
So I went up to the art center, and they first thought this is a crazy idea, but then ultimately they said, let's do that. And I went back to Al Haggerty and I said, you know what? I need $50,000, and then we can do this project. And in the beginning, everybody was dead set against it. And I had a hard time finding a team because I needed some support that could help me. And there was really nobody wanted to do anything. They were all scared. They said, it's not going to go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. But then we had the students there for the first time. They took a tour of the factory, looked at the stuff, and then finally, there was more people getting involved. They say, you know what, this sounds actually interesting. Some fresh eyes looking at things, students that have not the baggage of history with them, but they just look at things completely differently. And more people, they came out of the woodworks, saying, you know what, we're going to help you, because, that's what you also find in an organization. If for years and years they just get hammered, no, don't do anything new, don't do anything different, just keep going with it, you will have a few that are just dying. They're just so hungry for doing something new, different. They came out of the woodworks. Huh? And one of the first critics, that completely changed was a gentleman, from the I think the prototype shop. He calls me up and says, "Hey, Michael, I got an old DC-9 sitting in the desert. They're going to cut it up. But if you're interested, you and your students, I can give you the cockpit, the whole nose, the structure, and we can ship it to the students." And I called up the students and said, "Hey guys, we found this cockpit. You guys want to have it?" And those guys, before they even know what they're saying, "Yeah, okay, just ship it up here. We'll take care of it." And so a DC-9 nose was shipped up to Pasadena to the Art Center College of Design. And the students, they just took this baby and it was hoisted and attached right to the building of their school. And they punched out the wall. So now from the classroom, you could walk into this cockpit, and they started building a mock-up into this thing. And suddenly all these people, pilots, avionics guys, they all started coming and helping the students, give them, some feedback. How is this being handled in real life? How this is being done. We had a pilot there, and he was asking his pilot buddies, "Hey, can you guys come up here, talk to the students? It's amazing the work that they're doing." And at the end, they were finished, and this is the photo we see up here. They built this mock-up right into the structure of an old DC-9 right here. They built this whole thing. And again, this is the in old Douglas tradition. We went up there with a whole bus of our engineers, and there was the head of who was in charge of the cockpit or the flight deck for this airplane. And he saw it the first time and he said, "Oh, this is something that the pilots like. I hate it." And this is like the way you just go, "Oh, Jesus," So the people that are sitting in there working on this 24/7, if they like it, you hate it. What kind of a job is that? Why didn't you just go home and stay there? It's.
But that's how you got promoted, right? If you wanted to get promoted, you had to tell people that wow, that's crap. Right. We're not going to spend any money on that.
Right, and there were so many things, that details that went in there. And one of my favorite ones was in the old cockpit. There was this telephone, and it just looked like this. And one of these guys was saying, "We need this." And I said, "You know what? Why do you need this?" I said, "You know what? The last time I seen anything like that, there was a guy saying, 'Hey, this is Colonel Schultz, where's Colonel Klink, and I know nothing.' This is where I said, this is what we had in Germany during World War II, and you guys are still using that." And this is one of the many things, where you had to constantly convince them, let's do it. And then you and I had the encounter, this mock-up was brought back down to McDonnell Douglas. It was shown to a big audience.
Well, the audience that got me fired was a small audience. And I was brought there by, I think, Ron Suter, for sure Al Haggerty, and then a couple of other people. And I was there because they thought that if they had a consultant there, then they could convince Bob Nothing Under the Hood that this was a good idea. They were incorrect. They were incorrect. Al Haggerty was threatened to be fired. I was fired. I was told that my services were no longer required, and that I was inciting the troops and giving them false hope and stuff like that. So I said, okay, fine. And I got in my car and drove off, and that's by halfway to the airport, that's when I remembered, oh yeah, there were 2 other people sitting in my car, but I figured, they'll figure out some way of getting home. But anyway, yeah, so I was fired on the spot.
Well, and, so what happened then?
Oh, not just me, the whole damn company. We all got fired.
So then the cockpit, it was shown, there was the press, it was in the LA Times, it was on the Discovery Channel, it was in aviation magazines, it was everywhere. Then the pilots, the McDonnell Douglas test pilot, whenever some other pilots came in for flight training, he would tell them, hey guys, you want to see something? And he took them into the mock-up and he showed it to them. And more people suddenly saw this thing.
Yeah.
And apparently letters were sent to the management from airlines saying, you know what, if you guys build this thing, we will buy airplanes. And then what was the result of that one? For me personally, I received a letter from the new VP of engineering. Just going to mention the first name, Grace. And the letter was written, Mr. Liedtke, we hereby notify you if you show this cockpit to any other airline, it is reason for instant termination. Yeah. You will get fired. And I think you had a similar situation with some other airline.
Yeah. So anyhow, we weren't working with McDonnell Douglas, and Airbus gave us a phone call. And they said, Sandy, actually, I knew Bob Black was a guy, or sorry, not Bob, Bill Black was a guy that I had met at ABB, because the ABB was one of our customers. And he said, hey, I'd like you to come down to Toulouse, France, and we'd like to talk to you about this new aircraft that we're working on. And that new aircraft was called the A380, so it's a double-decker aircraft. And he said, we need to have fresh eyes and fresh approach. We just want to, crush what's left of McDonnell Douglas into the dust and into history books. And would you come down and see us? And so, sure, anybody that wants to pay my fee, I'll be there tomorrow. I will work for money. So I went down there, and they said, we heard that you had worked on something for McDonnell Douglas, a cockpit. And I said, yes, I did. And they said, we want to do that with a whole plane. And I said, well, that sounds great. But really and truly, I can't give you what we did there because, NDAs and stuff like that. And then they gave me this. This is Truck Interiors Magazine. Truck Interiors Magazine. And what's that sitting on the front cover? Why, it's the McDonnell Douglas cockpit. And if you look inside here, so I probably won't be able to, if you look inside here, look, it tells you how to do it. Everything you need to know on how to make this work is right here in this magazine. I thought, who would do such a stupid thing? Who would give away, what I thought was a wonderful bunch of ideas? And if you go in here, somewhere in here, there's an acknowledgement that says, hey, this is such a goofy idea. We don't care who looks at it. And so things happened. Now, I have a sketch, which we'll put up in a B-roll. And I have a sketch of this part right here. Remember the little drawer?
Oh, yeah.
There's a little drawer right here for the ground crew, right around here. And that's a dead giveaway because that was a brand new idea. The ground crew instrumentation doesn't really affect the pilots. They don't care. And so we took it off the top of the cockpit, or Michael and his team did, and put it inside this drawer. So when the ground crew came in, they could open the drawer, look at what they had to look at, close the drawer, and it kept everything out of the way. For flight, you didn't need it. If you look at the if you look at the Airbus A380, same drawer. They copied it because you know why? The pilots loved it. It's amazing to me that you could see so much incompetence in such a small small area. And looking at this and getting, I don't know, just getting the problem solved in such an easy and such an elegant way, it just irked the daylights out of me. But that doesn't just stop right there. So we both have stories about how McDonnell Douglas walked away from business. That was yours.
Yeah, I mean, years later, I ran into some other gentleman who was in marketing, and he told me one of the biggest deals that he had in his pipeline was selling exactly the big one, the expensive plane, to Qantas. It was like a big order. And he submitted the order to the headquarters, and it got rejected. Qantas, who are these guys? Unreliable airline. We don't know about these guys, yeah. But in fact, it was one of the oldest airlines on the planet.
I think it is the oldest, actually.
If not even the oldest, yeah. And this was definitely would have saved that project for some more years to come, because it was a huge order supposedly. But it just got shut down. And the only explanation the gentleman had was, you know what? They just wanted to sell the company for high price, not put any money into any new R&D, new development or nothing, keep the stock price high, sell it to Boeing, everybody's happy.
There was no sell. Actually, Boeing got it for free. Actually, I think they were given money by the government to take it. At the end of the day, my little story is a slightly different one. So I was still working with McDonnell Douglas, and I was staying at the Marriott, right by the airport, the little Long Beach airport,
runway,
and right by the McDonnell Douglas buildings, and there wasn't much in that area as far as entertainment or anything, so I just stayed at the hotel. They had a very, very good restaurant. And so consequently, rather than drive all the way to LA, I would just stay there and have my dinner. One night, on a Friday, I came in, and it was, early, and I just wanted to eat and go to bed. And I came in, and the maitre d' knew who I was, because I eat there almost every night, and parked me down. And then he brought in another crew of people. And this crew of people were obviously European, mostly French, and probably some German, but anyway, they spoke English. And so when they sat down, they were all speaking English. And it didn't take long to figure out that they were from SAS, Swiss Air. And they were...
Scandinavian Air Systems.
The which?
Scandinavian Air Systems.
Oh, Scandinavian.
Right there.
Okay. Scandinavian Air Systems. Well, anyway, they were speaking English, and I could understand what was going on. Anyhow, they were talking about how they weren't met at the airport properly, and how they felt a little bit slighted and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there waiting for my dinner, and the next thing they start talking about is, wasn't there supposed to be some kind of a meeting tonight, and where is a man who ultimately took over Boeing? And where is this guy? Can we mention his name? Is he still alive? If he is, no cares. His name was Stonecipher. Anyhow, they said, well, where is Stonecipher? And he was nowhere to be found. And I'm sitting there sucking on my soup or whatever the first course was, and they start talking. And as they're talking, there's a lot of other people in that room. And the people in that room, one person in the room came up, and he was a supplier. He was trying to get into McDonnell Douglas and had been kind of rejected. So he was drinking at the bar, and when they shifted gears into either French or whatever, it perked him up, and he came over. And he bought the table a round of drinks or something like that. And then he said who he was, and they said, oh, nice to meet you, thanks for the drink. And then he started talking like a salesman for Airbus. And it was incredible how much good he had to say about Airbus. So I listened to him talk and everything like that. And the guys from SAS said, we'd like to continue talking, but we already have a deal going with McDonnell Douglas. And I thought, well, that's, good on him for trying, but that ain't going to happen. So anyway, like I said, there's nothing in the neighborhood. It had a nice swimming pool. It's a sunny day. So I came down, I'm going to sit and read or do my reports or whatever, and son of a gun if these guys aren't coming back. And there they are, walking around the pool, drinking, talking, and not the happiest bunch, because apparently they'd flown in for a Saturday meeting with Mr. Stonecipher, and he wasn't there. At dinner that night, like I said, I'm a homeboy. I'm just going to stick around. And I came in, and these guys were going to come in as well. But that sales guy came back and said, "Oh, hey, I saw you going in here. I was just wondering, you want to try something new and different and blah, blah, blah?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." He said he knew some French restaurant that they could have some. And he mentioned the name. I can't remember it now. But it was about the most expensive restaurant on the planet, or at least in Long Beach. And so they all bundled up, and he had already rented like a bus, a small bus. They all got in, away they went. Didn't see him. And so Sunday morning comes along. They have a really nice brunch at this place. So I'm having brunch, and in comes the crew. And they're all laughing and joking, and they're all old friends now. Anyway, this guy, he's talking to him and whatnot, and it's obvious that they have decided to cut their trip short. So I ran and phoned up Ron Suter, and I said, "Hey, Ron, I think your guys here are gonna walk out on you. There's another guy here that's already contacted Airbus, and Airbus is coming to meet them at the airport with an Airbus aircraft." And so consequently, I don't know what size it was, but I do know that they got picked up at Long Beach. So it must have been a relatively small plane. They all got on, and they all flew back to wherever SAS land is. By the time Ron tried to roust anybody, it was too late. They were already gone. On Monday, Mr. Stonecipher said, "Okay, bring in those Europeans. I'll talk to them now." Apparently, he had gone deep sea fishing, which was much, much more important.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So
some tuna to be had.
Yeah, when I found that out, I totally mystified. How does a company ever allow such things to happen? But apparently, well, I guess when they amalgamated and Stonecipher took over Boeing, there's a lot of stories on him. He has a very interesting end to his career, but it's worth digging into if you're into mysteries and whatnot, or a little mysteries. But at the end of the day, it's amazing to me how a company of that size, with that history, with, I mean, tremendous talent. There was tremendous talent there.
Absolutely.
I mean, the guys on the floor would do anything. When I was working on C-17, I watched a little guy somehow crawl into the middle of the airplane and drill out titanium rivets. Holy mackerel, are you kidding me? Yeah. This is like incredible. You have to be incredibly strong and really small to get in there and do that. These guys would do anything to get the plane out the door.
Well, I mean, they were very, very passionate. That's definitely, they were absolutely passionate. It's like, yeah, you want to make this thing fly. And you were just constantly thinking about that, they got like whatever, one arm tied behind their back, and
Bob.
And they had to do stuff, and make it happen, For me, I mean, the big eye opener was, when I then afterwards, doing some projects, with Airbus, and I saw all this stuff going to the Paris Air Show, and all the things that I was constantly being told, oh yeah, you can't do that. You cannot do, I mean, you come from automotive, you have no idea, you can't do that. And I saw it right there, and the first time I went to the Paris Air Show, I called up my old boss, Bruce Palmer, and I told him pretty much, you know what? You guys were Dix, this is where we should have been at the Paris Air Show. All the stuff we were talking about that we should be doing, and when everybody was saying it can't be done, it's right there. They're all showing it. And none of the airplanes, wherever this stuff is being installed, are falling out of the sky. They're all there. And I actually had the opportunity many, many years later, I think it was in the early 2000s, I was at the Paris Air Show as an exhibitor. And lo and behold, there's like these two guys walking in there from Boeing. And I said, wow, that's great. So they allow you to leave home and come in foreign territory, foreign soil, and maybe learn something. He said, yeah, but it's only the two of us or the three of us. And I said, there's an entire chalet, the Boeing chalet. There's dozens, if not hundreds of Boeing people. And there's only 2 or 3 of you now exploring new technologies. What are the other guys doing? Just checking it out? Yeah, it's
drinking
weird.
champagne and eating shrimp.
Right,
yeah.
Drinking champagne and eating shrimp and bad-mouthing the competition,
Yeah.
while they were showing all these other things. And I said, look at this, all these innovative suppliers that they grew because of Airbus, because of other stuff, and we never took advantage of that because we were just sitting there brewing in our own stew and drinking our own Kool-Aid, how great we were, and those damn guys, over there, wherever, they will never be able to beat us because we built the DC-3, and the DC-3 still flies every day. That's the story that I heard.
So I've got the perfect wrap-up statement from Bonnie Sudik, a VP at McDonnell Douglas that also got kind of sacked and went to Boeing and did much better. And the reason she got sacked, I think, was because of this statement. If we argue hard for our limitations, we'll get to keep them. I did this whole deal right now with Michael so I could put forward that one statement at the end. If we argue hard for our limitations, we'll get to keep them. Ponder that if you happen to be a big shot.
So on that said, we're going to toast to that one.
Yeah.
Sandy?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.